University. I also teach a couple sections of public speaking. So what we're going to do today is kind of go through the criteria of what we are judging these contestants on, and that way we can kind of normalize our scores. Now, the goal of today is not for us to all get one specific score, but it's to minimize the range of difference between what we're providing for the contestants. So Tracy knows this really well when we do this with our public speaking instructors. How can we make sure that we're all giving the same range and not someone's giving a 20 while someone else is giving a 6? And we want to value that idea of exceptional when we look at the criteria provided within our grading rubric today. That's what Nancy and I have been talking about for the past couple of days when we were meeting to plan out this norming session. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go through the criteria. We will then listen to a sample from last year, one of our contestants from last year. We'll score it, take notes, and then we'll talk about why we provided the scores that we did, see where there's any difference, and then we'll do that again with another speech. So ideally, we'll get through 2 entries today, okay? Any questions so far before we start going over the criteria?
I'm Vanna White.
Okay. Anything you want to add before?
You know, the reason we wanted to do this was that we did have several judges who very nicely talked to us at the end of the last contest and said they did feel that they needed some more guidance to be an effective judge. So I'm so happy that Chris was at the ready to do this for us. So everybody has, and those of you that are online, it's the Appendix 1 that Chris is about to explore. That would be helpful.
Yeah. So as you see both on Appendix 1 for those of you who are joining us digitally and those who are present, this is a grading criteria, and we have the scoring ranges for each content on the rubric in which our judges will be scoring. So when you're doing this live, I highly recommend having this sheet either pulled up on your computer screen or in front of you. That way you can see the actual wording of the criteria and the scoring ranges for which the student may fall into. So first we're going to go into content. And content here is where we're talking about their expressed ideas of both the theme and their overall topic. So are they hitting the theme of, in this case, voices matter? So we're talking about First Amendment, free speech, hate speech. Does this fall within what we're looking for with the content of the actual contest? So that contest call that we sent out to the students for them to write upon. We're not talking about word choice here. That's in the next category. So when we're reviewing content, it's, do they have a clear focus? Are they able to support what they said through their story or through the anecdotes that they've provided? So we really want to make sure that we're able to move along with them and we have a full grasp of what they're seeking to tell the listener about. Or does it leave you going, I really don't understand how it fit the theme, or don't even understand what their stories were to begin with? That's where we would begin to grade them on content. Questions on content so far? I mean, if you have a question, we can talk about this openly. This is not, yeah, Tracy.
So with the theme being voices matter, on Appendix 2 that we got, there was a little more background about the 2017.
Because the exercise we're doing today are essays from last season.
So since you're sitting right there, Nancy, could you give us a little bit, when you say voices matter, can you expand on that just a little? Like what?
On the website, it explains that your voice matters. Did you ever feel silenced by your opinion? Have you ever been the target of hate speech? Have you ever been the deliverer of hate speech? How has the issue of free speech and First Amendment rights impacted your life, or how do you feel it impacts us as a society?
Perfect.
So it's rather broad, but it plays very well into our upcoming conference.
That's a beautiful thing. Thank
Well,
you.
can I jump in real quick too? This is Lindsay. I think just to, if it's not clear, was the the theme of national agenda as well was midterm matters. So we kind of tried to find a good connection between the national agenda theme and the upcoming free speech, hate speech conference.
Great. Any other questions or comments regarding content?
And that information is on the website.
Okay, next we're going into creativity and originality. And when we're thinking about creativity and originality, I want us to think about, does their word choice and sentence structure enhance the overall message for which they are presenting? So we can have word choice and sentence structure that is appropriate, but does it actually enhance? Are they using imagery, visualization, or literary techniques that go above and beyond our standard everyday writing? We also want to think about, are they using that imagery and word choice and sentence structure appropriately? Or do you listen to it and go, that really wasn't the right word there, or they didn't use that word correctly? So when we think about creativity and originality, does it resonate with you? Is it something that you've never heard before? Or is it a topic that you've heard before, but you haven't heard it in this way? We could hear a lot of the same things regarding free speech and the First Amendment. It doesn't necessarily make it original, but it's their perspective about the First Amendment that can make it original to you. So is it enhanced by their word choice? And is it something that it sheds new light that makes you go, oh, I never thought of it like that before. Or I thought about that, but not in that way. So that's what we're looking for when we say creativity and originality. So word choice, sentence structure, and those aha moments for us. Questions, comments? Okay, next we're going in.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Just one question. One of the things that I'm interested in about word choice and sentence structure is that because this is an audio vehicle, an audio platform, it's almost, I almost think of it as a grammar thing, but audio is different than writing, correct? We should treat it differently than, I mean, this isn't a grammar style test, is it?
No, but what if they misuse a word or a phrase? What if they just use really pedestrian language to explain
Right.
their story that doesn't resonate or help you connect, am I saying this correctly? Help you connect with the topic of their essay. You know, there are certain words that can really motivate people. There are also words that, you know, are just but yeah, broadcast and audio uses a lot of, contractions and sometimes sentence fragments to make a point. And that is usable as long as it works with their delivery and their conversational style to motivate their purpose of doing the essay.
If I can jump in too, in our conversations about the last year's submissions, it was really about, because I remember asking, can I see a transcript? And Nancy said, well, this isn't about the way it's written, it's about the way it sounds. So for me, I really focused a lot on how the word choice and sentence structure created a visual for me, created like a real, I could see the story being told. So I don't know if that helps at all, but that helped me.
Hi, this is Tom Winters here. So to make sure I'm getting my mind around it too, we're for this part, I guess we're not necessarily concerned so much that they're like sticking with like AP style or something like that. That we're not hearing something that is too much on the details, but more that it kind of meshes thematically. Is that what we're trying to get at? So like if there's a transgression here or there that's away from that norm, but it speaks effectively to the overall theme of the piece, then we're all right with that. Am I on the right page with that?
Absolutely. With these, we're probably seeking more of a conversational style than AP style. So if they do deviate from the typical norm, but it's effective within their piece, we can grade them appropriately or score them appropriate on that. Lydia, you had a question?
Yeah, so we're not looking for journalism speak or journalism content. We're looking for their opinion.
Mhm.
So if, I'm thinking if they make, if they say something, well, like, that's not true, or that's not right, is that the point? I mean, if they say something that is not, if you're talking about hate speech in a way that I say that's not right, or that's not true, does that count against them?
Yes, if it's completely inaccurate, I think it should be, because it's not an appropriate representation of the topic.
And that would, what you're talking about, would, in my opinion, would fall more into content
Yeah,
Then-
definitely.
than creativity and originality. If it's wholly incorrect, that's a content. So that's where I would take off for them. If you,
What if it's their opinion?
If they express it as opinion, that's okay, but if they're not labeling it as opinion, as they're saying, you know, we all know that the First Amendment only gives men the right to,
Yes, okay. Right,
you know.
yeah, okay, I just
Yeah.
want to make, because last year I thought there was times where I was like, I don't know that I agree with what your premise is. You did it well, but I just don't necessarily agree with it. A reason to think that way.
Sure. You had a question, Tracy?
I have a two-parter. So one, is there any stamps on the use of obscenity? And two, are they restricted to speech? Could they integrate a musical interlude?
No, it's against the rules. The
Okay,
rules
that's what I
list
was-
that, the rules do not prohibit profanity.
Okay.
And just to ease anybody's mind, we did have an entry last year that we had to contact the writer and verify whether or not they had discussed the content of the essay, which becomes our property once you submit it, with the people that they named in the essay. And they had not, and therefore the essay was pulled from the contest because of that. So we manage those things on a case-by-case basis, but they can say shit if they want to. I mean, we would bleep it before NPR and WVUD would air it.
great. Okay, we'll move on to delivery. Now, delivery in this sense is much easier than when we're grading students standing in front of us presenting, so yay for that. When we're listening for delivery, we're thinking about, is there tone, pace, intonation, is all of that appropriate for their contest entry? Do they fluctuate up and down throughout their speech? Do they incorporate pauses to add emotion? Are they incorporating vocal fillers of ums, likes, and you knows? Even though it's conversational style, we probably don't want to hear too many ums and likes, especially if they have a chance to edit and re-edit and re-record what they're saying. So is it engaging to the audience, or by the end of it, are you like, oh my gosh, I just want this over? Hopefully we don't get those, but if it engages and you want to listen more, that's a sign of a good delivery. If you're like, whew, not great, then obviously we're probably going to score them on the lower end. With pace, you want to feel as though you're kind of walking along with the speaker and not running to catch up, but you're not pulling the speaker to get to the end. So they should be somewhere in the middle of, we're not running, we're not crawling, we're simply walking along and we can follow with them. So vocal variation, appropriate pace, incorporation of pauses, all to add a little bit of emotion to what the speaker is saying. And then finally, production value. Production value is this a professional quality that they can put up on NPR station or WVUD and they don't have to re-edit their package? So if you hear extraneous noise in the background, you hear a dog barking or some clicking or some typing, that's extraneous noise. If it sounds like they're speaking through a muzzle or they did not use a microphone, that's not production quality. Think about those examples that you've listened to either on NPR or on any radio station. It's clear, it's crisp, we're not hearing popping. Also, think about, do I have to turn up my computer to hear the entry? Or is it like the commercial that comes on where all of a sudden it's blowing my speakers out? It should be appropriate, and that level should not be so far on one end or the other. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think I hit them all. Does anyone have any other questions before we go into listening to some examples?
You have to give me a moment. I have to turn our speaker on because the microphone does not work with the speaker. So those of you online, mute yourselves and you'll see me go like this, and it's time to listen to Kate Kovaleski's entry. It should be the first one that I sent you in the email. Oop. Let me make sure my Bluetooth hears it. Yep. I'm on Wonder Boom. Give me a second.
I was born and raised in a small town on the water in southern Connecticut. Fairfield, Connecticut is a picturesque, breathtaking place to live. I'm very lucky to have resided here in my small house for 21 years. I was surrounded by successful adults who worked hard to make a living and provide for their families. I was also under the impression that my parents did the same for me. I was blessed with nice, respectful friends, and I always felt safe and comfortable. However, as I grew up, I realized that the facade that is Fairfield County is not reality at all. It is a bubble, and that bubble was popped for me. I'm grateful to have lived in such a beautiful place. However, I'm even more grateful to have learned the truth and have now come to understand that perfection is not realistic. In elementary school, I began to realize that my friends were always going on luxurious vacations or buying the newest toy, things that my family and I did not do that regularly. Although I would not have considered my family wealthy, I did not consider us to be at any financial disadvantage either until I found myself to my peers. As I continued to mature, it became more and more clear that I was the odd one out. I felt divided at times. I felt that I did not have as much to offer as my wealthier friends. I often babysat at country clubs for young, unappreciative children and was surrounded by wealth, something I had never experienced firsthand. When my dad lost his job in the recession, things became even more difficult for my family. However, I saw this as an opportunity for growth. While babysitting, I looked at the successful adults around me, and here I found inspiration. I realized you cannot change the hand you are dealt in life, but how we play the hand is entirely up to us. When I came to the University of Delaware, this became even more clear to me. When I told people where I was from, they automatically thought I had money to spare and were jealous. I went from being looked down upon in my town for not being wealthy to being judged at college for being from such an affluent place. Once I explained to people my newfound understanding of the bubble I was raised in, I started to accept my family and myself more. If it were not for my differences growing up in Fairfield, I would not have such a good understanding of my worth. I'm not defined by the number of trips my family has taken to Disney World or the number of cars in our driveway. The friendships I have made at college are not based on which version of the iPhone I got for Christmas or the addition we're putting on our beach house. I'm grateful for my background, although I felt alienated and left out at times, because I now understand that money cannot buy you happiness. I am thankful my parents did not hand me everything I wanted and taught me to value my money, something I cannot say for a lot of people I know from my hometown. I worked hard for what I have, and that makes me even more proud of how far I have become.
Take a couple moments, jot down some notes on the sheet in front of you, provide some scores based off what we talked about. And then we'll come back as a group and discuss them individually and see where our gaps may be.
You guys just give us a wave online, or those of you without video, we'll just assume you're caught up.
you want us to let you know when we're done?
Yep, our room is still scoring.
Okay.
I'll check your email. We should probably wrap up if we can. We can stay on track.
All right. Let's start talking about, well, first, what were some initial thoughts about that one, and then we can go into the specific criteria. Any initial thoughts?
From an original standpoint, I mean, the idea of, we usually hear about people in adversity. I mean, I thought it's kind of interesting. You're in a rich place, but you're not the rich person. So you've got, on one hand, people look down on you because you're not rich in a rich place, but then you go somewhere else where like, oh, you look down on me because you must be rich. So sort of that was an interesting contrast that she noticed that she was.
Sure.
I would have liked to hear more examples of those relationships that made her feel that way. Like I was here only her point of view.
So hear more examples beyond her point of view.
Yeah, kind of bring me more into it in turn.
Great.
It was really disorganized to me. Yeah, it didn't have a clear, clearly expressed trajectory. And I don't know if the production quality was bad because of the Zoom or, so it's kind of hard for me to judge that, but it sounded of not good production value.
It actually, the production's good. I'm sure it's.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the Zoom. Yeah, this is Tom Winters here. I think that the production quality was because of the Zoom, because I was listening to it when we were waiting for the meeting to start. And both of them, actually, I was impressed with the quality on both of them, just from a technical standpoint.
I thought I heard her essence. Maybe it was that thing, but I thought there was an essence.
I think that was that thing.
Okay.
My little boom.
Okay.
Tracy?
I think Lindsay made a point that in one sense it was clearly structured, like there was a chronological, I don't know, trajectory, lack of a better word. But there was no point at which I felt, except when she talked about her dad losing his job, that I wanted to hear more. I was just like, okay, now what? It kind of met. You know, and to Lydia's point, that was the interesting part, and it kind of got dropped in at the end of like.
Yeah. And that was interesting, but it wasn't.
It needed editing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And her delivery.
Content-wise, not production-wise.
Yeah, I was not impressed with her delivery.
Yeah.
I thought that her delivery.
I agree.
She sounded like she was reading the essay. She was reading, she had written it out, and she was reading it, trying to give a little bit of inflection, but she wasn't telling me her story. She was reading the essay that she had written.
It was a very repetitive vocal pattern, I thought.
Yeah. I actually, I found, and it could be because I know this writer, but I could feel the emotion. I believed her. I didn't feel she was misrepresenting anything. There was a believability and almost a sadness that I could hear in her voice. So I think for me that overtook, because they're all going to be reading them, just like the NPR This I Believes, they're read. I don't know. I thought she had a believability factor with that youthful, feminine pain in her voice. I don't know. But it could be.
I didn't get that.
I think she was believable in the sense that there was no. I'm not listening to it, or I'm not cued by the vocality to be like, "Are you lying? Is that true? Did that really happen?" That wasn't there. No. But there just wasn't. And maybe because there wasn't an emotion for me to connect to either. Like, this is my story. This is what happened, and then my dad lost his job, and then I came here, and that was weird too.
So should we talk about what they gave?
Yeah. So first let's talk about. Yeah, sure.
I think
this one has the quality that I noticed with a lot of them last year, where they fit the theme, but they don't do a really great job of connecting their personal story to the bigger picture
Yeah.
that the theme is supposed to be about.
Mhm.
So that, I guess, goes to content.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So let's talk about content. Anyone want to kind of expand upon what you gave and why you provided that score?
I gave her a 12 because I thought that, I mean, she talks, she starts out saying, I lived in this perfect place. I had an idyllic childhood and it was perfect. Except then it wasn't because I wasn't rich. I mean, I kind of felt like she started with one thing and then shifted to another. And I think also the point of not really giving me that larger picture of how this impacts us. So, I mean, so a 12, which was, you know, very good, but not excellent, like, or exceptional.
Everybody within that range of a 12?
I gave her a 4.
Snap.
I was
It
more
was
like,
average. It was average to me. I mean, like, here's the thing that I had questions about last year too. Is like 1 to 20 means one thing if it's horrible to excellent, but it's different if it's average to exceptional. And this is my measurement mind coming out. But to me, I wouldn't rate that as very good, even though in a normal 1 to 20 range, I might rate it as a 12. But when 1 is average,
Yeah, that's true. You're right. 1 is average. I guess I was looking and thinking.
That might be a problem with the descriptors that I don't know if we.
Some of these are below. I mean, there's, you know, I think that you can't start at good.
Because I have to say, I looked at it as 10 being sort of the average, being that 1 to 20 range from crap to excellent.
but that's
So-
not what
Yeah, I
the
think
that's not what the scoring criteria are.
Okay, so we will look at that.
Well, so explain that to me, Lindsay. I'm not sure I understand you. Where? How do you?
If you look at Appendix 1, it says 20 to 17 is exceptional, 16 to 13 is excellent, 12 to 9 is very good, 8 to 5 above average, 4 to 1 is average.
Gotcha.
If it were me as a, anal survey question writer, I would rework that so that 1 is, the absolute worst and 20 is the absolute best.
I think too, though, we have to keep expectations in line. We are dealing with 18 to 21-year-olds who have never done anything like this for the most part. So, what is average for that mindset? I mean, if I were to do an essay after 30 years and it would sound like that, you'd all be like, what the heck happened to you?
So I'll say, so one is, I didn't have the calibration correct. So I was going on from 0 to 20, with 0 being abysmal and 20 being, wow, you're amazing. And since I teach public speaking all the freaking time, I was like, okay, this is coherent. It addresses the theme. It's got a little insight, and I gave her a 17. With the recalibration, that'd probably be an 8 or so. I mean, it would be lower, but it was just like,
Right.
and again,
Get 1 to 20.
I teach public speaking here.
So would it be more indicative if the lowest end of the scale was fair as opposed to average?
Or if you have exceptional, you have to have an if you have a
Yeah, you
Likert
gotta have-
scale,
Okay.
it has got to go from exceptional
I
to
think all
horrible.
you can just
or
rate,
whatever.
it's
Well-
if 0 is going to be, 0 should
12
be,
to 9 average.
12 to 9 would be,
Yeah.
I think everybody did pick up on the awkward transitions, which is good. I mean, I think that's what really dragged this particular essay down, was the awkwardness of her thought process moving us through. It was awkward.
And there was no focus. There was a focus, but at the same time, you were kind of pulling along to say, well, what is it? Like, what
Right.
are you?
where's your
affluent?
insight?
Yeah.
You're going to share with us.
whoever used the word trajectory, yeah, there was no drive through that.
Can I? Sorry.
The winning.
I think she sets up her framework well. She just fails to execute effectively. Is basically the way I look at it. So I'm still a little confused about the numbering though, because I'm looking at Appendix 1 as well. So if we're thinking that something according to Appendix 1, we're thinking what, like 1 to 5 would be the scale on something like this?
You're talking about revising the scoring to be 1 to 5?
I'm looking at the document right now, and it says, so average is 1 to 4, right, points, and then 8 to 5, above average, and then 12 to 9, very good, 6 to 13, excellent, and 12 to 17, exceptional, right? So, okay. So that is the brackets that we're going with right here.
Right now it is, yes, but we're going to talk about changing the
Lower end.
descriptors of the lower end to make it more in line with our understanding of what our true brackets are.
So one of the things on the numbers for me that is if we consider 1 to be average, there's no room for a below average grade, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's my concern, is that the assumption with this is that all of them are at least average or better. And if you happen to do really well on one part and maybe not so good on one of the stages, but really well on that, I don't know if there's a way to really capture that with this framework.
We're talking about switching it so that 12 to 9 will become average, and then adjust accordingly on either side.
Yes.
So we will.
That works for my brain, but I don't know what everyone else thinks.
So one of the other things for me is that in these rubrics, when you have 5 categories of numbers, you to the middle category. So I think it's easier with 4 categories of numbers, so that you have to so that you don't always end up in the middle, that you have to sort of make a definitive decision about above or below average, or I just think you get more of a decision with like 4 categories. If you go from 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 15 to 20, something like that, rather than having it 5 categories of 4, because then I think you always end up in the 9 to 12 range. Even if that's average, I think that you tend to end up there with your points.
Stephanie had a comment in the room.
I was just going to say, like, when I was listening to it, I was kind of mentally, I don't know if I should be doing this, was thinking back to the winning essay, Oscar de Class, who did such a good job of reading it and making you kind of empathize with.
Well, I think when we get to the next one that we're going to listen to quickly, that'll help us solve some of those questions in your mind about comparing. You want to talk about the other 2 categories very quickly? We want to stay on top.
So for creativity and originality, what do we think about that? What do we think about our word choice for sentence structure? Was it used appropriately, or were we kind of left wanting something else?
I want something else.
Tracy wants something else.
Agree.
Better story flow. It needed to flow better.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't remember what the last word she used was, but I feel like it was an inappropriate use of the word.
Yeah, there were
Should
a
be
couple of
become,
those.
not become.
Yeah.
What did she say?
She said becoming.
Yes,
Yeah, it was the wrong word.
Yeah, she misused the word. In a
correct.
She actually
Yeah, there were
misused the word.
several.
Yeah.
So not thinking about, the recalibration scale, we're still judging this towards the lower
Yes.
end here, right? We're thinking that this is probably below average in a sense.
I mean, in terms of the of who they are, that's about average.
I
Okay.
called it average, yeah.
This is how these kids, that's how they talk. They misuse words.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
badly.
But we're not saying, oh yeah.
No.
We're not, okay. So I think Nancy and I both scored her on the lower end there as
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
Delivery, we already kind of talked about delivery. I think one comment I want to make about delivery is, yes, they will be reading it. So we should take that into account, because these students will have scripts. So that's just a mindset that we have to set ourselves in for. It's, are they reading it in a way that adds value to it? So we can't think that they're just going to sound like they're talking extemporaneously to us, because they're not.
Right.
So are they reading their script in an engaging fashion? Lydia believes she was not. Any other comments on if we thought it was engaging or not?
It wasn't awful. And again, I mean, I hear reading. So this is not blatant reading. There was some There was some variety. There were some pauses. Was it impressive oral interpretation? No, but it wasn't abysmal.
And it was clear.
It was clear.
Mhm.
It had, it had pace. It had tone. It wasn't awful.
Yeah. I would say it wasn't perfect in terms of her delivery. I would think that at points she kind of sounded a little monotone. But so it's definitely not a 10, but it's probably around the 7 area in my personal opinion. I also teach public speaking, so I hear a lot of students reading off their note cards. I mean, anyone else, you feel free to disagree with me, but that's
Mhm.
kind of what I had.
Well, so what you're saying then is that's excellent. 7 is excellent.
We're going to redo the.
So are we talking about the 7 in the criteria, or are we talking about, I don't,
No.
No, we're
Yeah,
not-
that's my question as well. Is this the appendix 1 as it stands, or is this the realigned criteria? Because under as it stands, I would give it between a 4. I'd give it a high 4.
I gave it a
4
3.
or 5.
I gave it a 3 as it stands.
Oh, that's brutal.
Okay.
That too.
Come teach ComQ 5011, whole
Okay.
different conversation.
These are good.
But if we're looking to have like
That's
it
average.
redone, then I could see it as like a 7 maybe.
Okay.
So we clearly got it, that we need to change
Yes.
the actual brackets, which is
And to,
very doable.
yes. And to make this more effective, I think for the next speech, we're not going to necessarily talk about complete scores. We'll just talk about what we observed.
Okay.
So we are not having this discrepancy of if we're talking about new scoring brackets or old scoring brackets. And
I mean, you remember this from 604, right?
And then finally, production value. Just real quick on this one, because everyone's hearing different things based on how they're listening to it. When Nancy and I listened to it, it is a clear and appropriate production value. There was nothing that we could tell based on listening through our headphones and our computer speakers, both separately and together, where we saw anything that stood out glaringly in terms of their professional production quality.
For example, some of the ones last time, you could hear them turn their head away from the microphone. You could tell they were on a computer because you heard the click.
Mhm.
And some actually recorded on iPhones. And they just sounded like they were sitting in their bedroom with the air conditioning running.
Right.
So those are things that we...
Yeah,
They probably were.
Now I have seen.
from this is actually the one that I pay attention to the most here, just by virtue of how I come to you. But yeah, I listen to them with headphones, and then again with speakers on the 2 here, and a pretty ridiculous setup in my study. And to me, this would be of acceptable quality to go on the air on any radio station in terms of the technical quality.
So
yeah, I
would you recommend listening to them twice, once with headphones and once on the speaker?
I think that's what I plan to do, is do it both ways, because the speaker is probably more realistic how most people would hear it, but the headphones, you can really, if you listen to it on a good pair of headphones, like if you wear earbuds and they fit in your ear canal snugly, or like we do in the radio, the ones that cover your entire ear, you'll hear a lot of sins that pop right out, and you can tell if they were paying attention and
I've got those
doing
too.
the due diligence they showed. Yep, there you go. There's a perfect can right there. So, yeah, and you can hear things like if they're even with digital editing. I mean, my ear, I can tell sloppy digital editing in 2 seconds. And so, I suggest doing it both ways if you have time, especially if there's one like that you're on the fence about whether it's how you want to rate it.
Yeah, those are great recommendations, and I think it's valuable insight for you to provide, especially with your background. So if you have the ability, absolutely take Tom's advice. Okay, for sake of time, what I want to do now is have everyone listen to the second speech we provided.
Madeline Merritt's.
Madeline Merritt. So
I have to get our speaker up.
So take notes again. Do not feel like you have to score it. We will work on the scoring. We're taking notes on what we listened, what we observed, and that way we can get on at least the same page, that we're listening and picking up on the same things.
Put your headphones in. Keep your head down. Have your phone in your hand. You may need to call someone. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't make eye contact. Don't say anything. Just walk and walk fast. Since the age of 12, I've been taught to be ashamed of my body. Not because I was fat or ugly, but because I was a girl with a body, and for that, I had become a sex symbol. I was distracting to the boys and had to cover up. That strap of my bra that I was so unbelievably horrified to be wearing in the first place was suddenly a call to men saying, "Come get me." It wasn't about the little innocent crushes anymore. It was bigger than that and scarier than that. And I was a child. With the knowledge that my body was something that could be coveted came fear. Our bodies weren't ours anymore. They were for the onlookers. Don't wear that, it's too short. You're giving the wrong message. Look at her in that low-cut top. What a slut. I don't remember the first time I was catcalled. Isn't that sad? It's become such a mundane situation that few instances stand out to me. Most, though, include the same single word: smile. God, why do they always tell you to smile as if you owe them something? It's crazy how just one small word can really violate you. That man on the street has somehow sent fear through your entire body. So what do? How do you react to a stranger shouting at you solely because you exist? You learn. You learn that that smirk is an invitation, that you're acknowledging his existence and showing that you're vulnerable. So you look down and you keep walking. Now that I've grown older, I don't feel any safer. I feel worse. The more my body matures, the more I fear that my outfits make it look like I'm asking for it. Some amazing, strong women have taken stands against verbal sexual abuse by speaking out about the subject or making videos about how real it is. But sadly, I don't see much of a change in society. We still see victim blaming or hear the phrase, "boys will be boys," and I don't see that ending anytime soon. So I put my headphones in, look down, and keep walking.
That still gives me chills.
Yeah. Go ahead and write your comments on your score sheet for a few minutes and then we'll talk.
I do have to run in a couple of minutes to pick up my daughter, so I'll wait.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just start at least talking through some of these, and if you haven't finished writing all your comments down, that's fine. But for the sake of time, and Nancy and I always wanted to get people out on time, we'll continue to move right along. So what do we think about her content? Lindsay, I know you have to go, so you can chime in with any initial thoughts if you want to, and so that way you're not getting held up.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was, I remember it very well from last year's competition, and it was probably my second choice. Oscars was my first, but it was really well written, incredibly compelling. It grabs you. It was organized. I loved the bookends of look down. It was so that's content. creativity. Again, had a lot of, it was organized, used interesting words. Even use of the word slut was difficult to hear, but really compelling. And she had in terms of delivery, I felt the emotion, and the production value was great, even over Zoom. And so, yeah, all around, I just thought it was excellent.
Great. Any other initial comments, whether about content or anything else about?
I thought she was exceptional. I remember, I think last year, I think I gave her a score. I mean, I think that her, it's powerful. It has a tie to society as well as her own personal experience. It's the questioning of why has changed and asking that. It's not offering a solution, just saying this is what it is. So in terms of her content, I mean, it was like powerful and sad at the same time. Just very well done. I think in terms of the way she wrote it, the use of the sentence fragments.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to have a full sentence with subject, verb, object. I mean, it's fragment. The way she punches it, the delivery, like it all to me worked together to be an extremely compelling and exceptional essay.
And it goes back to what Deb and Tom were asking earlier and discussing about, are we being grammar police here, or is it appropriate for her topic and her delivery and theme? And we would all argue, absolutely it is.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for this. I'm sorry I have to run. You did an excellent job, and I look forward to reviewing these.
I had a problem when I listened. Was not in this group, but when I judged my group last year, I was, going along and listening to each one twice, and then I would listen to one that blew my socks off, and I'd be like, was I too generous earlier on? And I don't want to compare each, but I also don't want to invalidate exceptional. So Chris had a great consider for me about how to handle that.
Yeah, I mean, so this.
I actually do have a question about the mechanics of how it works when that brings up an interesting point, because I haven't actually gone into the Google site yet. Are we able to just listen to each entry once and that's it? What's your recommendation, that we listen to it and judge them discretely, or should we judge them in terms of how they stack up to each other, or what's the best practice?
That's a great question. So my advice comes from listening to 5 speeches per day when I'm teaching public speaking. And what I recommend doing is, we're not doing comparative grading per se. We're not saying how they stacked up to one another. But I feel as though when you listen to batches of speeches, you get a truer sense of what the overall population you're dealing with is. So my personal recommendation, this is how I scored them last year, and this is how I recommend when you're trying to do any type of judging, is listening to them in batches and take notes, whether it's on the sheet that we provided as an example today or in your own notebook. That way you don't fill it out, give a score, and then have to go back and actually rescore it. Once you listen to 5, you'll get a truer sense of how one act truly stacks up. And then you can assign the scores based on, when we redo the criteria, what is actually appropriate. So I always listen in groups of 4 or 5, write all my notes down, and then I'll go back and listen again for my true scoring when I'm actually ready to provide. So it allows you to listen to it multiple times, and it also allows you to know what else is out there, or is this truly exceptional or below average to what has also been entered into the contest. Tom,
great, thank you.
I have one question that I was curious about in this in particular. I thought Maddie's work was really, really powerful, but the only thing I think that was lacking, and maybe it's a minor point, is that there was this great intro and then the segue, and I'm just wondering if she hit the whole theme idea well enough and connected it to that theme as I mean, all the rest of it was so excellent, but I'm wondering if that was maybe the one area where you could look at it and go, maybe she could have done a little better.
it's great that you bring that up because I actually brought that up with Nancy when I listened to it for the first time about how she could tie everything more together in order to truly theme or to truly hit her topic. I agree. I think it's probably more of a minor point. It wouldn't be something that I would bring her totally down on. But okay, maybe it's not totally perfect in our opinion. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
But I would agree with you. I think that maybe she could have explored it a little bit better, or tied it up with a nice little bow, or added the curl on the end. Whatever it is, but yeah, and that's okay. It could be a minor point, but I think that comment is
Interestingly,
valid.
this was written before the New York Times article hit. I thought that was kind of mind blowing when we were getting ready for the award ceremony. Does she place second or third?
I don't think so.
Oh my God, she had to write this before the New York Times article hit, which is just mind blowing.
Yeah. Any other comments on what we thought of her piece?
I had a comment and maybe a question here too as well. It's more of I guess an observation and a question of the mechanics of speaking. So I'm noticing that, and I noticed this a lot at the radio station as well, that the vocal fry seems to be getting like more and more intense every year, and that this piece, the biggest thing, it's a pet peeve of mine, and I'm just wondering if I should put that in the back seat and not give it weight or not. But the one thing that was kind of distracting to me, just from a presentation standpoint, was her vocal fry was pretty intense. Is that something that it's just a thing with this generation and we deal with it now, or is that something that should be taken into consideration?
First of all, it's nothing compared to what you hear on NPR right now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's awful. NPR is the worst about it. It drives me up the wall. These are the things that I worry about when I drive home sometimes from work. But yeah.
Yeah, I would be right there with you with up talking. And my son actually was dating a girl who had vocal drag, and if they had gotten married, I was going to have to sit her down and just talk to her about losing it. I was like, I couldn't deal with it. But I think that we have to acknowledge again the population that we're dealing with. They're young kids, and these are not necessarily they're not broadcast professionals by any means.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's something that we can kind of keep in the back of our head, and if it is truly something that's like, oh, I can't listen to this anymore, then you might need to put that into account with your scoring. But if it's not like obtrusive, if it's still allowing them to be effective in other means, maybe that's not something that we consider our full, like, I'm going to really knock a moment there.
And given,
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to calibrate myself because it drives me up the wall, but it's not something, I'll just set it aside unless it's like Kim Kardashian level or something like that.
Tracy?
but given that they're reading, for me, if they can transcend the reading and get more, and which she did pretty effectively, right? The vocal variety, the shift in tone, the pace, where it sounded, less read and more spoken, as opposed to the first one, which was clearly more read and less spoken. That to me, that would outweigh.
I can live with it.
Yeah, I can live with.
So in order for us to stay on time, just to kind of wrap up this second speech that we listened to, we see how Madeline addressed many of the concerns that we actually had within the first speech.
Yeah.
The first speech lacked focus. It lacked clear kind of creative writing in the sense that the first one was used inappropriately, where her vocal and creative choices were very appropriate for her topic, her theme, and her delivery. Her delivery was stronger. Even with some of the deficiencies she had, she punched out those words effectively. She uses pauses. We're not feeling like we're running along with her. And then her production quality was very good. I think when we listened to it, it was a little soft, and I think Nancy and I each took off a point. But that if all the judges are giving 5 and 2 other judges give 4s, we're okay with that.
Right.
We wouldn't give them a 1, right?
Right.
So that's why we wanted to have us listen to both speeches. I call them speeches, they're entries, but
Yeah.
old habits die hard, right, Tracy? So we'll open it up to questions, but before we do that, I do want to thank you all. I know this wasn't like the way we all expected it to be, but it actually was truly valuable because I think that this could have been a major contention on why we were having such discrepancy in our judging last year. So now that we know that, we can go back and we can make it stronger. So thank you all for your feedback and for taking time to be with us today. If you have any questions or closing comments that we can address, feel free, but I didn't want to hold our presentation.
I want to thank Chris. He put a lot of work into this. Thank you so much.